Hi, I'm Will Hopkins.
And I'm Pasha Kohzadpour.
And I'm Gracie Kirschner, and this is the Second Industrial
Revolution, or Technological Revolution, occurred in the late 1800s. Advancements in new industries led to new possibilities in production. Germany became the industrial rival of Great Britain. Advancements in transportation and communication affected trade, migrations, and global interactions. Pollution, overcrowding, poor working conditions, and child labor became hazards of industrial life. Reactions to industrialization included women's suffrage, public education, and labor movements. Capitalism and socialism were political, social, and economic ideologies used in this time. Industrialization also impacted imperialism in the 19th century. How did advancements in new industries, specifically steel, chemicals, and electricity, lead to new possibilities in production?
Cheap steel soon found many uses beyond its original intent. By 1880, buildings, ships, and railroad tracks were made out of steel. It became the material which machines and weaponry were made. In the world of chemicals, dynamite, discovered by Alfred Nobel, was used in the construction of tunnels, roads, oil wells, and quarries. John Wesley Hyatt succeeded in creating the first synthetic plastic in 1869 called celluloid. However, it was primarily used in the making of combs, knife handles, and piano keys, as it was highly flammable. In the 20th century, the German dye industry began to take off, as they produced 90% of the world's dyes. People such as Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla worked on taming electricity. In 1879, Thomas Edison developed an incandescent lamp used for small spaces, and in 1882 created the first electrical distribution in New York City. In 1889, Tesla created an electric polyphase motor using alternating currents. In the coming years, micro-inventions increased the reliability and durability of these products.
Discuss the steps that the newly created state of Germany used to become the industrial rival of Great Britain. How did it help to promote industry within its borders?
By 1900, Germany had the largest economy and military in Europe, which led to them playing a major role in World War I and II. Germany was also right in the middle of Europe, giving them access to the countries around. The German chemical industry dominated the world when it came to synthetic dyes, accounting for nearly 90% of the world's dye production. Three major firms, BASF, Bayer, and Hoechst, produced several hundred different dyes and accounted for 80% of Germany's dye production. The three major firms had also integrated upstream into the production of essential raw materials, and they began to expand into other areas of chemistry such as pharmaceuticals, developing aspirin, agricultural chemicals such as ammonia to improve agricultural yields, and the development of alloy metals. Germany promoted industry within its borders by using its own raw materials for development instead of exporting them.
How did advancements in transportation and communication affect trade, migrations, and global interactions?
The effects on trade were that for the first time, goods from the American interior could be shipped directly to the Atlantic and vice versa. Being able to ship products great distances transformed the nature of the economic activity in the United States. The transportation revolution opened up new markets for farmers, industrialists, and bakers, who could now bring crops like cotton from the Mississippi River Valley, wheat in the Midwest, and manufactured goods in upstate New York into a global market based on credit. Similarly, the expansion of the railroad brought a dramatic reduction in time and money it took to move heavy goods, creating new opportunities for wealth at a time when 2/3 of all Americans still resided on farms. The effects of migration were that the U.S. was transformed into an industrial economy centered in large metropolitan cities. The U.S. had national markets with goods and people moving in every direction. The urban population increased more than the rural population. Carter wrote that from 1880 to 1920, population growth was concentrated in cities. The urban fraction expanded from a little more than 1/4 of the national population to more than 1/2. The pace of rural to urban migration of the native-born picked up during this era, but it was nothing close to the flood of immigrants coming to cities. From 1880 to 1920, the number of foreign-born increased from almost 7 million to a little under 14 million. In 1900, about 3/4 of the populations of many large cities were composed of immigrants and their children. Immigrants, especially the second generation, provided for about half of the added workers in trade from 1880 to 1920, primarily in general merchandise, food, and apparel stores. The effects on global interactions is that the increase of Western influence on civilization was felt throughout the world. It also changed the standard of living worldwide. This also helped to advance military technology, which assisted in World War I and II, and increased rising demand for products like cotton for cotton mills and metal and other raw materials coming from underdeveloped and isolated countries. This also allowed for the development of vaccinations which decreased disease in underdeveloped countries located in Africa and Asia.
The hazards of industrial life: pollution, overcrowding, poor working conditions, and child labor. How did this impact life at this time in the industrial world?
Pollution became a major problem with the introduction of the steam engine and large industrial factories. Concentrated conditions within the industrializing cities and the use of coal both increased pollution. Waste was dumped in rivers, polluting the water people drank, which only increased the spread of disease. The Great Stink in London in August 1858 was a noted event during which hot weather worsened the smell of untreated human waste and industrial effluent that was present on the banks of the River Thames. From the description of Manchester, Frederick Engels states, "In dry weather, a long string of the most disgusting blackish-green slime pools are left standing on this bank, from the depths of which bubbles of miasmatic gas constantly arise and give forth a stench, unendurable even on the bridge of 40 or 50 feet above the surface of the stream." People who lived in poverty could not support family living standards. From slums and slumming in the late Victorian London, Dr. Andrzej Stienko states, "In the last decade of the 19th century, London's population expanded to 4 million, which spurred a high demand for cheap housing. London slums arose initially as a result of rapid population growth and industrialization. The result of overcrowding forced the majority of Europeans into poverty. The overcrowding of the city led to a higher percentage of illness and made it easier for disease to spread. Working conditions were extremely dangerous for many reasons, namely the underdeveloped technology that was prone to breaking and even fires, and a lack of safety protocol. Owners were under no regulations and did not have financial reason to protect their workers. Factory workers wanted cheap labor, and operating the machines didn't require much skill. For this reason, they would hire women and children. Wages were very low, and women and children received less than half the wages of men but had to work the same amount of time. Most people had to work between 12 and 16 hours a day, 6 days a week without paid holidays or vacation. Safety hazards were everywhere, and small children had to work in coal mines without candles and were even beaten by miners if they fell asleep. Children did not get any sunlight, physical activity, or education, which led to deformities and a shorter than average length of life. Injured workers also usually lost their jobs and did not get any compensation."
Explain reactions to industrialization, including women's suffrage, public education, and labor movements.
The working conditions in factories, mills, and mines were terrible. The government took little interest in creating safety standards or in regulating how businesses treated workers. The typical industrial employee worked long hours under dangerous conditions for little pay. Many workers were poor immigrants who had little choice but to keep working despite the conditions. Workers began to revolt. They joined together and created unions in order to fight for safer conditions, better hours, and increased wages. The unions organized strikes and negotiated with employers for better working conditions and pay. The American Federation of Labor was founded in 1886 by Samuel Gompers. It became a powerful force in fighting for workers' rights through strikes and through politics. The Great Railroad Strike of 1877 was a well-known strike. It began in Martinsburg, West Virginia, after a company caught wages for the third time in a year. The strike quickly spread throughout the country and troops had to stop it. Some strikers were killed, and the strike ended 45 days after it started. Workers began to see the power that they had through the strike. The women's suffrage movement was the rising suffrage movement, and the influence of progressiveness and socialists began to challenge traditional male beliefs of women's role in society. In 1848, a group of abolitionist activists, mostly women but some men, gathered in Seneca Falls, New York to discuss the problem of women's rights. Most of the delegates to the Seneca Falls Convention agreed. American women were autonomous individuals who deserved their own political identities. The National American Women's Suffrage Association was formed to set out to obtain voting rights. The expansion of public education and industrialization went hand in hand. Public education became a movement in that it should be provided to all children regardless of wealth and status. Some examples of reformatory acts were, in 1833, the government passed the Factory Act, making 2 hours of education a day compulsory for children working in factories. The Public Schools Act in 1868 was reforming Britain's public schools such as Eton and Harrow. Discuss ways that industrialization impacted imperialism in the 19th century.
Railroads built in Africa, Asia, and Latin America helped the nations who had land there. Additionally, Jane Austen writes that the availability of cheap sources of raw materials, the desire for new markets in which to sell manufactured goods, and the need to protect these acquisitions all factored into late 19th century imperialism. Iron and steel replaced wood, making ships better in the mid-19th century. Engineers built more fuel-efficient engines for the ships, which could help empires and countries expand. It also helped them stay connected to their faraway colonies. Submarine telegraph cables allowed for better communication over long distances. This helped the French and British who had colonies far away from their motherlands.
Compare capitalism and socialism.
Capitalism is an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. It emerged in the 1600s, and it is a system of large financial institutions like banks, stock exchanges, and investment companies. Commercial capitalism, the trading system of the early modern economy, is often distinguished from industrial capitalism, the system based on machine production. It is based on individual rights and has high class distinction. Its biggest trait is that there is little government intervention. Socialism, on the other hand, has a lot of government intervention. It is a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the economy as a whole. It started in the 1830s, and socialists advocated government protection of workers from exploitation by property owners and government ownership of industries. It led to the founding of the socialist or labor parties throughout Europe in the second half of the 19th century. It is based on equality, and there is low class distinction. Karl Marx referred to his idea of socialism as scientific socialism. He created the Marxist branch of socialism. He is known for his books Manifesto of the Communist Party and Das Kapital. Both socialism and capitalism use market forces. They are commonly used with democracy, although it is not essential, and they both believe in private property for homes.
In conclusion, the Second Industrial Revolution brought about many new ideas and innovations that helped positively and negatively impact society and the surrounding economy. Rapid advancements in steel, chemicals, and electricity led to new possibilities when it came to production, and inventions like the telegraph made it easier to communicate. After the Second Industrial Revolution, the world was never the same.